to the Colin Gunn Show.
Well, I'm here with a friend of mine, Rick Boyer, and he is someone that I meet often at the homeschool conventions, and we have worked booths together. I've been aware of him for quite a while in terms of all of the material that he produces, all terrific stuff. Very creative person. This is the thing we know about Rick. It's not boring stuff. There's a lot of fun and humor in it. That's what I appreciate about Rick's work. So, Rick, thank you for talking to us.
It is a pleasure as always, Colin.
So, Rick, tell me, what are you up to these days? You've got so many things on the go, so many terrific things. Tell my audience a little bit about what you do, who you are, and tell me a little bit about who Uncle Rick is.
Okay, well, it's a long story because, as you say, I do a lot of different stuff. You know me from speaking at the homeschool conferences so much. My wife and I started homeschooling ourselves in 1980, so we've been at it 33 years. So because of our experience, we get asked to speak a number of different places and meet some really cool, interesting people like yourself and some of these other lunatics out here, and we always have a good time. We started out primarily with parent education, teaching people how to raise Christian kids. But as years went by and we were producing all these different gimmicks, flashcards and workbooks and stuff to teach our own kids biblical character qualities, we organized it into an age-appropriate character curriculum, preschool through high school, all based on Scripture, with workbooks, flashcards, Uncle Rick audios, and so forth. You're asking about the Uncle Rick. Well, as you and I were talking earlier, my office is a plywood shack in the middle of a friend's farm, and he lets me treat the place like it's my own. I keep my horses there, keep my dogs there, keep some calves there from time to time. We got a garden there and a pond for the grandkids to fish in. It's just a cool place to hang out. Well, I don't have a nice soundproof recording studio. So I just incorporate all the farm racket into my Uncle Rick recording.
So you can hear horses and dogs barking in the background and the birds tweeting. That's the idea. But you've made an excuse for not being in a recording studio. But it makes sense. In a recording studio, what they would do is you would have perfect silence, and then they would put in all those noises digitally in the background, but you've got all of that in your little place.
Yep, yeah, it's pretty much automatic. So I just take advantage of it, and I read whatever I'm reading to whoever's going to be listening. I call them my little buddies, and I read it just as I read it to my own kids and grandkids. And I incorporate all the racket. And if Mr. Titus, the farm owner, is going by on his tractor, I comment on it and wonder what he's doing, and whether he's out baling hay and I'm going to have to help him hoist that stuff into the barn later today, and that sort of stuff. And I see a groundhog went across the pond bank down the hill, I might comment on what a big fat groundhog that is. Or if the dogs are barking around chasing something, I'll comment. I try to make them feel, like they're right there on the farm with Uncle Rick having a big time, and while at the same time learning worthwhile things.
Excellent. Well, you've been a pioneer of the homeschool movement, being homeschooling for so long, and it's good to talk to someone like you, because you've seen the pitfalls, you've seen the blessings as well of what it means to be a homeschooler. Could you encourage my audience at home, the homeschooling moms and dads, what is homeschooling? What's the key to it? What do you think of what's the most important thing they need to know?
The key to homeschooling is Mark 3:14, okay? Jesus was, of course, the master teacher of all time. He wrote the textbook for life. And if we look at his example, we see that it's not complicated. Because of our own upbringing, we try to make life complicated. We try to make learning and education complicated. But Mark 3:14 says that of all Jesus' disciples, quote, he chose 12 that they should be with him and that he should send them out to preach. Now, the product he wants is preachers. So the process he chooses is what? Not send them away to college and seminary and not see them for the next 3 years, but rather, hey, you follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Home education is just the purest form of discipleship. We take our child by the hand and say, you follow me and I will teach you to live the Christian life that I live as an adult. Part of that is going to be equipping you with the academic knowledge that you need. We're not gonna build our own quasi school right here in the house. We're gonna look at books. We're gonna go places and do things and meet people, and we're gonna learn together. Right now, one of the most exciting things we've done in our whole experience is what we're doing with our youngest child of our 14, who's now 14 years old, as a matter of fact. And we are studying World War II by interviewing World War II veterans. It is exciting. We have learned so much and had such exciting experiences. We just last summer drove to Indiana from our home in Virginia to attend the reunion of the survivors of the USS Indianapolis, a ship that was sunk in World War II, the greatest naval disaster in American history. And it's quite incredible to meet 19 of the 30 men who are still living who survived that awful disaster.
That's incredible. I think the key to this is that homeschoolers, or those that fear homeschooling, they think it's something that it isn't. They think that homeschooling, I'm not saying that it's easier to do what we want them to do, but they set it up as though they have to be, teach every subject. Everyone, they have to do trigonometry to the highest level, their calculus and all the rest of it. But the truth is, there's much more of a flexibility that's the reality of adult life, the flexibility of adult life, although we've got the corporate world where you go and sit in a cube and it is more like public school. But the reality of a man's life is that you're meeting people, you're talking to people, you're making deals, you're doing many different things. You learn not in half-hour increments, you learn by just sitting down and reading books cover to cover. And that's such a simple method of of the reality of education. Though the public schools have deceived people because they're the professionals, and of course we realize that anyone can do their job, and actually homeschoolers have done a way better job without even a quarter of their resources. Is that what you would have seen with you? So is that something you would encourage parents with?
Yes, absolutely. And it's not only my experience and your experience in seeing this around the country as we travel to homeschool conventions. It's well established by plenty of research. Nobody even argues anymore that homeschoolers aren't getting a great education because there's too much evidence that we are. I know I've had two different officials from two different colleges tell me that the best students they get are homeschool grads. And I have no doubt I'd hear that from other college people if I talked to them. But this is all well established. You don't have to worry about academics. In most cases, you don't have to worry about legality because those battles were fought by those of us who were around in the 1980s. And the main thing now is people just have to understand if God trusts you with children, you can trust yourself to train your children.
And that's a key to what we say to people who worry about it. And I tell them, you love your kids, and that's the beginning of your ability to be able to educate them. And the saddest thing about the public school system is that parents drop their kids off with the assumption that those kids are going to be loved within the walls of those public schools. And of course they're not. They're not even remotely close to being loved. The teachers are there because they're paid. The kids are there, but they don't love your little son or daughter. And that's the saddest deception, I think, of the public school system. Have you seen that?
Yeah, that's a great point. There are some great dedicated people in the public school system, but they are not allowed to have close relationships with the kids. They've been sued enough times. They and the schools have been sued. Teacher will give a kid a loving pat, and all of a sudden he's charged with sexual abuse. And so the school says, don't ever touch the children.
Right, don't touch them, don't hug them, don't
Yeah, oh yeah.
give them encouragement that's biblical.
Yeah, you certainly can't preach values to them. And how is a kid supposed to feel loved, and how is he supposed to feel significant when you're trying to teach life without values to them and tell them they're descended from monkeys?
Absolutely. So what's your hope for the future of the homeschooling movement? What's the next stage?
Very good question. I've really prompted you to ask me that one. Okay, this is what I hope to spend the rest of my life doing, is working in that very area. And let me try to say it this way. In the 1980s, the issue was legality. We had all those legal battles to fight. In the 1990s, the issue was legitimacy. There weren't enough homeschoolers until around that time where the research stacked up and was undeniable. But we established legitimacy in the 90s, both academically and socially. Our kids didn't turn out to be people that couldn't deal with people. They excel at it. Since then, there's another L word, and that is leadership. I believe that God has raised up the homeschooling movement to provide the Christian leaders for His body, the church, as we approach the cultural battles of the 21st century. We're not God's army. God's army is the church. He's always had that army since 2,000 years ago. But much of the church is AWOL. They're absent without leave because they're not being led. So we need to train up our children now, not just in an atmosphere of legality or legitimacy, but training with the purpose of leadership. And that's what Jesus did with his disciples. He wanted to send men out to preach, and he wanted them to make a difference. Obviously, they were successful. They were accused of having filled Jerusalem with their doctrine. In Antioch, they were accused of having turned the world upside down. They were having an impact on the culture. Jesus trained them by involving them in his life as he lived it, in his work as he worked. And that's what homeschooling is, the purest form of discipleship. We need to understand, though, that like Jesus, we're not just training up young people to be comfortable in their nice houses in the suburbs with their comfortable jobs and all that. We're training them up to be leaders in the culture war to get the church moving. And as our kids rise up and say, I'm going to do something for God, will you help me? There will be no shortage of followers because the public schools are training out passive people right and left.
That's exciting to me, and I'm glad you have that sentiment, that purpose for homeschooling, that we're not just here because it's the better choice. There's a bigger vision to all of this, and it can be incredibly life-changing and culture-changing if homeschoolers have that vision. So thank you. Rick, tell the people at home how they can find out about you.
Okay, look at our website, characterconcepts.com. That is where we will introduce you to our Character Concepts curriculum, where we're trying to teach our kids the character qualities of godly leaders, preschool through high school. You can also look at my other site. It's called takebacktheland.com, and that's where we talk more about training up leaders for the culture war. We have a one-day conference that my sons and I do to equip parents and their young people together to be leaders in the culture war. That's takebacktheland.com.
Excellent. Well, Rick, thank you for talking to me. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Colin. I do love that accent.
Oh, yeah, well, you've got the accent, but thank you.
Thank you.
God bless.